magic is found in every room where people connect over a shared purpose. In this weekly podcast, Luke, Hannah, and Chris explore the role of purpose, courage, mindset, and culture in every leader's quest for transformational performance.
Hello, and welcome to Magic in the Room. I'm Hannah Braderud.
And I'm Luke Freeman.
And I'm Chris Province, and we're joined today by Dr. Bob Schooley. Dr. Bob, how are you doing today?
Good, guys. Good to be back with you.
Awesome. Well, we're going to continue our series on mindset today. And today we're going to talk about fixed versus growth mindset. So looking to kind of dive in and have some fun with that concept with all of you. But, as I think about it, I'm wondering, right, can a pessimist become an optimist? Can you start in one place and land in another? And these are always fun conversations. So somebody kick us off.
Good question. I will proudly say that I'm an eternal optimist. I have always been an optimist. I believe I will always remain an optimist in general. Now, there are some circumstances that maybe I get a little pessimistic about if I've had, repeated negative experiences. But in general, I do tend to look for the silver linings. I look for the next opportunity after a setback. I always believe there's a second chance. So I think that's, for me, I don't know that it's true for everyone, but I do tend to think that you have kind of a propensity towards one or the other that is relatively fixed.
Yeah, I'll jump in there and I'll say I'm an optimist. Probably most specifically, Marla, my wife, calls me a time optimist. And so whenever I start a project, I always say, yeah, I think this will probably take about an hour. And then it's 3 or 4 hours later. And I don't know why I keep getting it wrong. That optimism of everything's going to go right is just baked into who I am somewhere at my core. But I kind of think the same as Hannah. Like there could be instances, and there are some in my life where I think I have become a pessimist. Specifically, I'll say around systems thinking and organizational systems. And, there are a lot of times when I think I used to say, well, it's about the people. And we just need a great leader, or we need some folks just to be courageous and rise above. And I think more and more I start believing the systems that we're in just drive a lot of behavior. And if the systems won't change or can't change, it's really hard to be optimistic that people's experience day to day is going to change consistently. And then can people change? Sure. I think significant life events can change our outlook. And I've known folks who used to be optimists who are now pessimists and look at the world through a pretty, dark view. And folks who used to be pessimists who have transitioned to really being a little bit more carefree and upbeat about the world that they live in.
I probably have to go with I'm definitely a glass half full kind of guy. I tend to, I believe we find what we look for, and I usually am searching for goodness. But I think I think there's a little bit what Luke just said about I think we can go through periods in our life, or we can experience some things that are really hard, and that can temper that a little bit. And then the second part of your question, Chris, I don't know that someone can fully change over, go from one end of the spectrum to the other. I think it's just one of those things that's more innate, and probably a little bit more nature than nurture.
Yeah, I agree. Also just an eternal optimist. And I guess can't has never done shit for anybody. And doubt is like the hindrance to mastery. Doubt is a performance limiter, and playing the what if game is full of suffering and exhaustion. So keeping that mind on like what is so important. And I think that's why leaders achieve, right? Because they believe in the power of positive potential. You know, you guys have heard me say before, like, we don't know what today has in store. We just don't know. But we approach it without doubt and knowing we can accomplish something meaningful. And then I think meaningful things happen. I want to get your guys' take on this. So we all know the five senses, you know, what we see, what we feel, what we hear, what we smell or taste. But let me try this on. Like, is our mindset, our attitude, our approach, like, is that not our sixth sense? Like, it's where all of our modeling comes from. It's where we're making sense of the world. And it's that filter thing, right? It's hard to describe, but everything goes through there.
My initial instinct was that the five senses are kind of an input mechanism, and then I tend to think that our mindset is more of an output mechanism. That can, unfortunately, I think you're exactly right, though. I think it tends to bias that data that's coming in and what comes out based on that. And I think your use of the word filter is also appropriate there. But that's fascinating. I as soon as I say that, I think I could see the other side of that and argue the other side of it as well. Good question.
So I think, you know, our nervous system does play a role here to some extent, both when it comes to, you know, the first question about optimism, pessimism, mindset, how we respond and react to situations. And that's where awareness, we talk a lot about awareness and we talk about emotional intelligence as awareness of our emotional states. And really, it's about awareness of our nervous system and how that operates. And that, I think, is kind of like maybe it's a sixth sense. I'm with Bob, though, in that all of our five senses are the inputs that inform our nervous system and our brains, you know, on how to react, because we're always looking for threats, right? Our brains are really good threat detectors, so we're always on alert for a threat. And therefore, our brains do have a negativity bias, which I think comes into play where, you know, we tend to filter a lot of situations in a negative light because we're looking for what could possibly go wrong, right? So some people are very risk averse. And I know, Chris, you talk a lot about risk, and yet you're also an optimist, right? And so I'm an optimist, but I tend to ignore some types of risks or not see other types of risks. And then there's other risks that maybe I'm more sensitive to than other people aren't. So I think that's where kind of our nervous system and our psychological makeup does play a role that informs, to some extent, our mindset as well.
My initial thought was kind of to agree that our mindset and essentially confirmation bias, which is the bias that leads us to only select data from our environment that confirms what we already believe, that our mindset, you know, if we have more of a growth mindset and we're interested in learning, we might see more, hear more, perceive more from our environment. And I do think that's true, but as I reflected on it, I think I would push it even further and say that our mindset drives us into different environments where there's different types of inputs. So if I have a growth mindset and I want to learn, or I want to have an adventure, or I want to be challenged, right? I'm probably going to find myself in different places than if I had a very constrained mindset. So I'll just use for me, like, I love adventure. I love exploring. I love art and aesthetics. So, like for me, if I go to an art museum or a gallery, my mindset, my interest in learning and taking in aesthetic beauty, like led me to that place. And I'm going to see things that I wouldn't see and experience things and touch things and smell things and everything else that I wouldn't necessarily experience if I wasn't driven by my mindset to some degree to find myself in that space.
Yeah, thank you, Luke, for and all of you for plugging in with that. I just thought it was something fun to try on, and the importance of knowing ourselves, right? It's very difficult, I think, for us to bring value to our own life or bring value to the life of the people that we serve if we don't master ourselves first. So if we don't have an awareness of where we're at, we probably have a fixed mindset. True or false?
I think there's definitely some truth to that. If we have no awareness of where we're at, we also have very little awareness of where we can go and of the possibility for change.
At a high level, I'd like, in your own words, okay? I want to explore something in your own words. Whenever we workshop this topic and say, here's a fixed mindset, here's a growth mindset, let's describe them. Like, it's one of the most intuitive things. Like, every group nails this concept. But yet we battle fixed mindsets within teams every day. So I guess in your own words, describe what do you perceive a fixed mindset to be, and what do you perceive a growth mindset to be?
I see a fixed mindset as someone who believes that they are incapable of change and that whatever they're good at is what they're good at, and whatever they're bad at is what they're bad at, and that's just how it is. Like the phrase, that's just how it is, I think kind of describes a fixed mindset for me. And then a growth mindset, if I were going to use a phrase, would be, I don't know that yet, or we haven't figured that out yet, but we will. Or, if we put in more effort, we'll be able to learn or grow.
I was pulling up Twitter after you asked your question about like knowing ourself and how that connected to mindset. I follow a guy named D Hawk. He is founder and CEO emeritus of Visa, and he's in his mid 90s now. And just a couple things I saw today. So, 93, 94-year-old guy, 7 hours ago, he said, when we fully attend to management of self, management of our own integrity, honesty, character, compassion, empathy, ability, and wisdom, excellent management of all else follows as certainly as day follows night. I thought, man, like that's very much a growth mindset way to look at the world, right? There is something I can do to manage better, to lead better, to influence those around me better, and that is to manage myself. And then, so I was looking for that because that's the thing that I had remembered. And then the very next thing that he said, which is even more connected to growth mindset, is age that mourns the passing of youth and tries to emulate it is a sad thing. Would a ripe peach complain that it's no longer a blossom, or the blossom try to contort itself back into a bud? To each the fullness of its present being and the promise of what it might yet become.
Oh, that's beautiful. I love that. Oh, what a great quote.
Yeah, and I mean, to live that and to believe that, like, that's a growth mindset.
Yeah.
And it's probably why he's 94 years old and he's lived that long. You know what I mean?
And he's tweeting at 94 years old.
I mean, I think there's something that when you kind of accept things and as they are, and work through them and learn from it and develop character in the face of that trial. Um, it's just a different existence. And Bob, you've known me for a lot of years, and I remember being a kid sitting in your office, if I could describe it as such, and there was my perspective that was right and everybody else's perspective that was wrong, and there's one way to get there and it's my way, and just all the fun stuff, the vigor of a youthful manager, right? um, but kind of walk me through. I'm going to kind of set you up with a coaching question. If you can describe in your words what's the difference between fixed and growth mindset, then what is your approach, Dr. Spock, on how you do the Jedi mind tricks to get someone that you coach to move through their process? Because I am living proof of your output. So how do you do it?
I think what Hannah shared earlier was really spot on. I always think of a growth mindset as somebody that really just it's all about possibilities. It's literally kind of what can I do next? What can I learn next? They're constantly looking to the horizon. Um, and Chris, I think I don't know that when I first met you that I immediately thought this guy's got a fixed mindset. Um, I think um, maybe, and it's probably another conversation. Maybe a little more inward than outward on the kind of the Arbinger scale. But I I think when we were young and we're new to leadership, I think the predominant model that we observed is a little bit of command and control. I think that kind of peaked out maybe in the 80s and 90s, but you probably experienced some of that in your life. Whether it was in high school working at the pizza parlor or wherever it might have been. Um, so I think that you mentioned the Jedi Knight trick. I really believe a lot in that kind of helping people kind of unravel what they've experienced in their life and try to open them up to some new possibilities, which is somewhat of a kind of a growth approach. Um, and I don't think, I don't think I hope I never did. I hope I never discouraged you and told you, you're effed up and you need to turn it around immediately. I think if you come at, if you come with somebody, you come at them with compassion and you're saying, hey, let's explore that a little bit. Where's it getting you today? Is it getting you to where you want to be? Um, and you answered all those questions. I think all I did was, and all I do is try to ask really good questions that are thought provoking and kind of help people see perhaps an alternative route to where they want to get to that might not have as much, friction or struggle in it. I shouldn't say the word struggle because that's not necessarily a bad thing, but
Suffering, chaos, conflict. Pick one. Yeah, just pick one. Um, yeah, I mean, I was like, gosh, just some of the stories, Bob. What it really meant to me, and I saw a really interesting definition of what a coach is this week, and it was, someone, a person that loves another that helps them apply what they believe. Hey, that's pretty good. I like that a lot. Help them acquire knowledge, apply what they believe, kind of make it safe and give permissions for them to do so, and like not burn the house down, like, and that's like, Bob, you really like reintroduced me to learning and like thinking and how to apply things in an intentional way, and also like the concept of abundance versus scarcity, the idea that we're not battling over one pie. Like, there is a lot of opportunity out there, and everyone can be wildly successful. And the way that you supported me, like through that process, the things that you exposed me to, and then your words of encouragement. Like everyone, like not just me, everyone is starving for encouragement. And when you're a struggling young leader experiencing a lot of conflict, chaos, suffering, trying to feel your way around in the dark, those words of encouragement are meaningful. And like that's what I still like I hope to get a lot better at is everyone starving for encouragement. When I'm coaching and can give them that, they're more confident in finding their way. So that's how I experience that process. It's just you're so exceptional at it, and I'm grateful for you every day. So um, thanks for getting me there. So with that, let's talk about some hallmarks of fix versus growth. Like, what are some of the beliefs, or what are some keystone habits within each of these profiles? And I don't know if we want to kind of juxtapose them or if we just want to cover fixed first and growth second. But let's just start riffing on this thing. Like, what are some hallmarks of fixed mindset versus growth mindset?
Yeah, I always like to look at them in contrast because for me, then it becomes really clear, right? The difference between a fixed and a growth mindset. We can start with skills and how we look at skills through a fixed versus a growth mindset. So one of my favorite quotes by John Maxwell is sometimes you win, sometimes you learn. And I kind of modify it to say, sometimes you win, always you learn, because there's something to learn from every experience. And then you look at, and we'll talk about setbacks and failure and how we approach those from a fixed or growth mindset. But, it's about recognizing in a fixed mindset, we believe that our skills are innate and that they're unchanging. We believe that either we're good at something, we're naturally good at something, we have talent, and therefore we're good at it, and that's not going to change, right? And the things we're not good at, we're just not good at, and we can't really get better. And then from a growth mindset approach, we look at skills as a result of hard work. It's something that can always improve. We can always get better. And I do think that talent does play a role, right? So we have certain things that we're talented in, but we can still learn to get better. I get this question about sales all the time. Are salespeople born or made? Can you really become a great salesperson if you're not really a natural salesperson? And I think that's the same question about leadership. I mean, it's the same thing. You can absolutely learn the skill of sales. Now, someone that's naturally talented at that and apply the effort, and build the skill, they're going to probably get to a bigger level. Like if I started to try to learn baseball today, I could get better at than what I am today, which is like absolute on a scale of 0 to 10, I'm at a 0 when it comes to baseball skills. And I could probably get to a 1 or 2, But am I going to get great at baseball? I don't believe that I have the natural talent for it. But I do believe that I can get better than I am today, right? So that's kind of the growth mindset when it comes to skills.
Yeah, I think it's also a really good call out. Like maybe a lot of time fixed mindset will mistake talent for skill. Right? And I always, anybody that's ever coached baseball knows you are born with talent and you develop skill. And thank God baseball is a game where it is technical enough you can develop skill without a whole lot of talent. I'm also living proof of that. So, but let's talk about like that challenge, Bob. Like as these two approaches look at a challenge that's set in front of them, how do they differ?
Yeah, I think the fixed mindset when they see a challenge, they really quickly assess, do I know how to do this? Or have I ever done it before? And I think that's true of a growth mindset as well. And I think that how they react to that kind of differentiates the two. If a fixed mindset person looks at something that they've never done before and don't know that much about, like Hannah playing baseball, they're probably going to say, that's not for me. I can't contribute. And somebody that's a baseball player and knows the game, and they look at that and say, yeah, they'll jump in and take a couple of swings. So I think really the way in which we size up things, but that even with with a growth mindset, people are typically they're going to accept the challenge of almost anything that takes maybe learning some new skills, maybe some new habits. They're always going to be open to that opportunity to expand and grow.
Yeah. And, my takeaway, and Bob, you hit on it, and, we talked about doubt being a key performance limiter. Like you just touched on another one, and that is like contempt or discomfort and the willingness to sit with that. A lot of times you'll see fixed mindsets, like they have contempt for discomfort. I'm not good at it, so it's not fun. Or it's raining, this has to be a shitty day. Right? So there's this element of contempt that kind of rides along with fixed mindset and contributes to further kind of constraint of mastery and performance limitations. So I like what you scratched on there with that. Luke, what do you think about like effort? Like how does effort come into play? And it might follow up on what I just talked about, discomfort, but for the different styles, how does it show up?
So it's interesting that you talked about contempt being one of the hallmarks of a fixed mindset. And I think I would take that a step further and say not just contempt for challenge or situation or effort, but also in some degree contempt for self, and saying, I'm not the kind of person who can do that. Or usually it's masked by who likes doing that, right? People will kind of cop out and say, well, I don't want to, I don't like doing that. But I think at the core of that, there's a little bit of self-hatred of I can't, and I'm not even going to try. Whereas growth mindset, I think, sees effort, sees challenge as really essential to life. The word that comes to mind for me in all of this that I think is part of the growth mindset, I don't know, rules of living or worldview, is passages. Whether that's a rite of passage or a passage to the next level. But I think about effort and challenge as this gateway, this passage into a new plane of being and really into a new person. I'm going to go back to that D. Hawk quote, right? A bud turns into a blossom, which turns into a peach, right? Those are passages of remaking and becoming something different. And part of the nature of the thing, sure, it's still a tree, but part of the nature of it has changed. And I think those with growth mindset see effort as a part of that passage and that change, and believe that it's possible to navigate it. There's a hope there that I think is maybe maybe that's the opposite of contempt for self or contempt for the situation, is hope of a new way of being.
Yeah, that's great. Amen. And I think if I'm saying, Luke, you're an outdoors person, you like to climb mountains and fun stuff like that. Hannah, you as well. If you come down from the peak and I say, hey, how'd you get all the way up there? And what did it look like? You say, well, you can go up this pass and that pass. And then go up the south face and go over to the summit. And when you get up there, you'll see this, that, and the other. And a fixed mindset says, okay, like, why do I need to go? Like, I saw, you just told me how to get there and what I'm going to see. Like, that's my take on effort, right? For the fixed mindset. But I think the growth mindset says, I don't want to follow that path. I want to see if there's another path, just for the sake of it. And then I want to see with my own eyes what that vision is up there. Even if everyone I know has already done it, I want to see it too. I want to see it through my eyes and understand the world my way.
So Hannah, I'm curious, like, what's your response to that? When you want to go climb a mountain, what's the thing driving the desire to do that hard thing? Because anything above tree line is physical torture, right? For those who don't live at that altitude all the time. Why? Why do that?
For me, it's about the thrill of discovery. I love discovering new things. And maybe that for me really encapsulates the growth mindset, because not knowing presents opportunity for me to learn something new, to discover something new. And aside from the fact that just, nature is so humbling when you're in the mountains, you definitely get this sense of scale and how small you are and how powerful nature is. And there's something so visceral about the experience of being out in the mountains, and especially on a, above tree line and when you're at some exposure, right? It's humbling, but it's also exhilarating, and to get to the summit of a peak, like just the challenge, the effort in and of itself of getting there. And then, it can be really grueling, but then there's the sense of reward when you get there and you get that view, and then your body rewards you with endorphins and, endocannabinoids and all the feel-good chemicals that your body naturally produces. Who needs to get high when you can get a natural high from just literally being out in nature and pushing your body to, through some limitations. We're created with, our brains are created with this natural reward system for pushing through challenges. And so it's the sense of discovery, and then also that exhilaration of after you push through the challenge, the feeling that you get. And then of course the views. That's the, those are all reasons why I love to be in the mountains and climb.
I love this conversation so much. Like, we just hit on like another thing. Like, what's that performance limiter? Like, being low energy. Like, having the energy to go and do the things is key to high performance. And that also is part of that mindset. We have to believe that, my life is unique and I want to cut that path and I want to experience that thing, that I am somehow worthy. And to kind of get back to Luke's deal about that contempt, right? I've got to feel worthy. I've got to love myself. I've got to monitor myself and say, I'm the kind of person that climbs that mountain. People like me do that. People not like me sit at home because that's comfortable. So that sense of energy and being like seeking and openness to things, like, it's a hallmark of that growth mindset. But when you don't have it, it limits your ability to master anything. If you don't have the energy or you don't feel like your own journey is worthy. So, thanks for that. That's compelling. I'm ready to go climb a mountain.
Well, and we've talked about this before in the podcast, and I think it's relevant again here. It has something to do with identity. And when we recognize that we get to choose our identity, so Chris, you get to choose to say, I want to be the kind of person who climbs mountains. And that's going to begin to inform your belief about yourself and the actions that you start taking, right? First, it informs your beliefs, that influences your thinking influences your feelings, and then your feelings spur action. And I saw it as such a great example in my own life when I started running about a year and a half ago and decided I want to be the kind of person who runs marathons. Like, that was 100% a new identity for me, right? And because of that growth mindset that said that I can choose to take on this identity, now I'm living that where I wasn't before. And I think it's the same thing with high performance. We can choose to be the kind of person that performs at a certain level. We can choose to want to be the kind of person who is a great leader. And that belief is going to inform the thoughts that we have about leadership, and then how we feel about how we show up, and what we want to do. And emotion creates commotion. It leads to action, and action is performance.
Yeah, and I just to maybe do like a professional spin on this, and I'm going to get kind of vulnerable here. One of the things that I really want that aligns to my purpose, which my purpose is to invite people, teams, organizations into what's next for them, into that new way of being through those passages. There's a belief inside there and a desire inside that purpose I want to be able to walk into any room and offer value and be able to connect with the people there and make their lives better and invite them to something better than what they're experiencing now. And so how that shows up and connected back to growth mindset is, like, I have written down in my commitments that are connected to my purpose that I want to learn a new business model every year. And so to me, like, that's very analogous to climbing a mountain, right? So I spent a year in a large publicly traded oil and gas company, like, learning that. I hadn't been in oil and gas before, right? And had the privilege to get to work with a lot of amazing people and build some great relationships. I hope deliver value into folks' lives, right? Right now, I'm getting the opportunity to work with a state government and work with people in all three branches at kind of the highest levels of leadership there, and have conversations about how we really change the way that they deliver some of their processes. Right. And it's big and complex, and I've never been in state government before on a project. So it is like a mountain. There's twists and turns and things to discover and things to learn, but it moves me on that journey to becoming a person who can confidently walk into any room and deliver value and be able to confidently invite people into whatever's next for them. And so, I don't know, I feel a little out there just saying all of that out loud, but that really is what I want. And it drives behavior, right? And so I think for all of us, the clearer we get on the identity that we want to have and how we want to impact the people around us, how we want to influence this world that we're in, should encourage us to adopt a growth mindset.
Hey, I always love sitting in on these podcasts because I always learn a lot, and I'm also able to connect a couple of dots. And based on the conversation we just had, I love the fact that I think we've seen some really important breakthroughs. We do a lot of leadership executive coaching, and a lot of these executives are moving through leadership passages where they're going from perhaps leading a function of the business to actually leading the enterprise. And that can be very disruptive and kind of require kind of a transformation where you literally have to shed what you're really good at and leave that behind and take on some new leadership responsibilities. And a lot of people are not successful in that journey. But what I love, and I think what I'm hearing too, and this helps me connect, I think the work that we're doing with regards to personal purpose, that's what kind of ennobles people or gives them that courage to take on that disruption that's associated with, hey, I've got to take my leadership to the next level. What I did as a functional leader is not going to serve me really well as an enterprise leader. Matter of fact, some would argue that it's a whole different ballgame, requires a whole different set of skills. So I love how kind of connecting those dots, and I appreciate you guys doing this for me. I think our purpose allows us to be intentional. It also gives us that, it emboldens us, it gives us that courage to understand and move towards that pain that's called disruption, and allows us to be transformed. And Luke, I love the metaphor that you shared of going from the bud to the blossom to the peach. That's a really cool metaphor.
Yeah, I think you hit on something there too, Bob, when you said, just what would happen. And I know, like, I'm I'm asking this question rhetorically because I'd love for the people that listen to answer as well. What would happen if we shed what we were technically great at, like what we are most competent with and comfortable doing to extract value, and became what we needed to be? Like, how much courage, like, that's Hercules courage, right? Like, that is huge. But I really do believe the only thing constraining us from being what we're supposed to be and really emerging is what we're doing today. And there's this idea that as you interact with me today, I hope this is the worst version of me you'll ever see. I say that a little tongue in cheek, but it is really what I believe.
As you were talking, Chris, I just had this mental image pop into my head of a kid on the side of the pool, and I'm imagining, whatever age it is where this happens, 5, 6, where you've been in floaties, you've had a life vest on, whatever, and you're clinging to the edge, holding on, but there always comes that day where you kind of let go of the edge and push off, and like all of a sudden you know how to swim. And sure, it takes a lot of practice and muscle memory, and it's not one day I'm in floaties not knowing how to kick and the next day I can swim a lap, right? It's not that, but there is that moment of letting go and taking a risk and exploring. And everyone listening has done that. And all of us on here, we've done that. So what we did when we were 5 or 6, like, why would we stop?
No, it worked for us then, right? That's one of those hallmark or keystone moments of newfound confidence. Riding a bike, letting go of the side of the pool, right? Like all those things. And when we get to adulthood, like, our worldly obligations tend to put different pressures on us. But how do we find that space? How do we do that in a disciplined way as an adult? We don't want a lot of suffering or crash and burn the lives around us. But how do we still accomplish that? So kind of as we wrap up today, what I'd like is if all of you would share, like, what's one thing, if we wanted to level up our growth mindset, what's one thing that I can do? Either it's within me, or maybe it's something I can do with members of my team, to increase how, just level up how we grow together. But just what's one thing that you would share, or that maybe has helped you, that's elevated or moved you maybe a little further away from fixed and more into this growth territory?
So I can go. We had a great conversation earlier about coaching growth mindset and how we can ask great questions. I want to flip that a little bit, and not all of us are great at coaching or comfortable at that, but there's a lot of folks who are leaders, whether they lead a small team or lead a function or an enterprise. And, a trick that I learned a long time ago from a guy named Greg Robinson, I've mentioned him a few times on here, when, when learning how to help people learn and adopt growth mindset, he said, what I found worked really well was just having the courage to ask myself compelling and honest questions in the presence of other people and of my team. And for me, that's just been incredibly helpful. When I can model that and say, well, is there a world where we could do this, or even make it personal? I'm not sure, like, could I just take on a different role in this team? What would that look like? What does this team really need? I just want to reimagine that a little bit. I'd like some feedback. And if I can lean into those conversations and make my teams a place where that's a safe conversation, then I think all of a sudden people can't help it. They start asking themselves the same question. Like, what would it be like if my role was a little bit different? What would it be like if we operated a little bit differently? What would it be like if we played around with the idea of our value proposition? All these ideas kind of start floating to the top. So I think just that idea of asking ourselves honest, authentic, courageous questions in the presence of our teams is a practice that I think any leader, can adopt.
Man, that's a money right there. Like, is your value proposition explicit? Like, maybe that's a little bit different than your purpose. Like, what are you showing up with to the team? Like, do you know what that is? Again, like, bringing value to our own lives and the lives of others is all about knowing ourselves. Great practice. Like, let's get explicit about our value prop and let's play with the things we maybe believe to be true. Bob, what's a tip or trick here?
Just real quick, I'd kind of like to poll the experts. What percentage of people do you think have a fixed mindset?
I'm gonna guess, and I'm gonna be the optimist I'm gonna say 35 to 40%, and I think it could be as high as 70, but I'm gonna be the optimist and say 35 to 40.
I was gonna land at 60% growth, or 60% fixed, 40% growth.
Yeah, I guess my optimism shines through here because I'm definitely in Chris's camp of my gut feeling, and maybe that's my personal bias because I have a growth mindset and I am an optimist. And I wouldn't say that I necessarily am like fully evolved there, right? I have moved from a fixed to a growth mindset in a lot of areas of my life, right? And with more awareness, I've been able to move there further. And so I don't know if that's if that is a typical journey, right? As we move through life, maybe we learn more about how to move ourselves from a fixed to a growth mindset. I think some people choose that, others don't, maybe. But yeah, I'll probably go with more like, I'll say 30 to 40% fixed, and that the majority have a growth mindset. And I really hope that that's the case.
It's kind of interesting because there isn't really much research out there. But Dr. DeWick, basically her best estimate is that 40% of us have a fixed mindset. So you were all over that one. I think it's really important. I think for right now, given everything that we've been through, I would encourage leaders when they think about their team that I think that fixed mindset is kind of negatively dealt with or treated as kind of something bad. I would really try to stay away from that. And I think it's really important to kind of help people understand kind of where are you, and then let's talk about where we want to go. And I think you got to make it really safe and okay to for someone to say, hey, I'm probably more fixed than I am growth. And you got to meet them where they are. I'm guilty of this as well. Whenever I put a scale and I say, okay, fixed to growth, I always associate 0 with fixed and 10 with growth. So I'm biased. I think even the way we present it on a graph is probably a poor way of doing it. Um, so I think I would encourage leaders today, all things considered, kind of know that people are going to be pretty risk adverse. It's pretty crazy out there right now. It's still a lot of things are up in the air. It's very unsettled. The people feel like they're kind of on shaky foundation, so they're going to be more risk adverse. And if you kind of start digging into this, do you have a growth mindset? And people, I think it's just going to create more anxiety on top of what's probably already a really crazy, anxious workforce. But I still think there's a lot of value in helping people kind of understand where they are and then try to move more towards a growth orientation to the way in which they conduct their job and the way in which their career unfolds for them.
Yeah, I'm going to key off of kind of what you said earlier, Bob, about, looking at a fixed mindset in a certain light or, negatively. I believe the most important thing that any leader can do, and I'm going to use leader here in the broadest sense of the word, anyone who has influence with other people. So whether you're a parent, whether you're a teacher, coach, leader in a traditional sense, we can help to put people in a growth mindset just by how we present the challenge or how we set up the task, right? And that's one of my biggest takeaways from Dr. Carol Dweck's work, the book Mindset, is that, and her studies were specifically on teachers in classrooms and with children and how children responded, right, to the teacher's mindset and how the teachers set up the task, right? So and as leaders, we can do the same thing. I do it as a trainer. Every time I walk into a classroom or open a new class, and I teach a lot about sales and customer service, I always start by saying, this is a skill that you can learn, right? You may not be good at this yet, but this is absolutely something that you can learn and that you can get better at. And let's learn that together. And so I believe the most important thing a leader can do is to present a growth mindset in the way, we may not be here yet, but we're going to get there. We're going to put the effort in and we're going to get there. And it's the effort that pays off, and really rewarding effort. And that's where recognition becomes really important. And we have an episode on recognition as well here on this podcast, but, recognizing effort rather than just output, right? That helps to instill that growth mindset in people.
Well, if you're going to put out all that effort, try not to suck. Yeah. I think my share would be, we talked about it not too long ago, is like, don't assume things are good or bad, right? Do not assume the outcome of a consequence. Approach it as it is and start solving problems. I recently watched The Martian, right, with Matt Damon. We get stuck on Mars and, grew the potatoes in the latrine. Like, hey, this is my situation. I got to start solving problems. Get after it. Let's go. And I think not getting emotional about the conditions we find ourselves in, or that somebody doesn't want to do your project or doesn't want to build the OSS the way you want it built or disagrees, right? Don't get emotional about it. Like you don't know if it's good or bad, but let's deal with the problem as it lies. And, I know something I'm going to try to work on is if it's raining, be okay with that. It doesn't ruin the day just because there's some raindrops outside. Like, I have to change my mindset to adjust to this day, not the other way around. It's not somehow impeding on me. It's just being what nature is. So if I'm going to have that mindset, I'm going to, having that mindset allows me to approach it differently. So I'm just going to urge everyone to let go of the contempt, and exist and love the minutes. Speaking of loving minutes, loved them all with you guys tonight. Thank you all very much for talking about mindset. I think next time we're going to visit more about mindset. We're going to talk inward versus outward, because this idea of having that igniter mindset where we're not only growing, but we're applying it to the people we're in service to. And I look forward to having that conversation with all of you. So thank you all so much for adding value to my life and just being part of it. And I'll see you guys next time we do it.